On this Saturday night, a seniors' home in BC, the center of an outbreak. Investigating the link between the facility and a healthcare worker infected with the new coronavirus.
We are in an extraordinary situation.
The tough task of tracing where else the worker may have been. Trapped with COVID-19 on a cruise ship.
If you're asking my advice, I say don't go.
The frank warning to avoid this kind of travel. Plus, the call for mandatory paid sick days during the health crisis. An Iranian family seeks refuge in Canada after their son is killed in the Ukrainian Airlines disaster.
Aloha!
And who is Tulsi Gabbard? How the lone female running in the Democratic race is managing to stay in the spotlight.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with developing news about the spread of the new coronavirus. The British Columbia government confirms an outbreak at a Vancouver area long-term care home for seniors. 2 residents there have tested positive for COVID-19. Tonight we are learning the woman who was the first person in the country to contract the virus through community contact is a healthcare worker at the facility. And that worrisome situation is sitting heavy with the province's chief medical health officer.
At this time, I am asking people to consider having virtual gatherings, to consider not coming together, particularly if you have people in your gathering who are elderly, who are more
The fatigue and the stress are setting in. The 2 patients at the seniors' home are among 6 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed in BC today. That brings the number of confirmed cases in Canada to at least 57. 2 of those BC cases involve recent travel to Iran. The other 2 are people who were previously passengers on the cruise ship that is now quarantined off the coast of San Francisco. We'll have more on that in a moment. But first, here's Michael Couture on the efforts to prevent the virus from spreading among the public.
It's a whole community problem, and you see it in these 3 sets of cases today.
The 6 new BC cases originated in different places across the globe. 2 are people who recently traveled to Iran. 2 were previously passengers on the cruise ship that is now quarantined off the coast of San Francisco. And the last pair are perhaps most concerning as they are elderly patients from a care home in North Vancouver. Now, it's worrisome not only because the mortality rate is higher in older people, but because those 2 are connected to that first community transmission, which is said to be a female employee of the Lynn Valley Care Centre.
many people who work in care homes work in many other settings as well. So there is an ongoing, very detailed investigation that will be done.
Which will include whether or not the worker got COVID-19 from the Lynn Valley facility or perhaps another place she may work and unknowingly transmitted it to the two patients. Now, what is clear, according to health officials, is the need to limit public gatherings, or at least keep your distance from others while out and about. They're recommending it for something as simple as religious services or even large sporting events like the Rugby Sevens Championship being held in Vancouver this weekend.
I brought rubber gloves to go to the washroom, and I brought like little wipes and stuff, and I was a little bit concerned because I'm immune suppressed.
The International Ice Hockey Federation has taken it one step further, canceling the Women's World Hockey Championship in Halifax at the end of the month. The tournament will be played in Nova Scotia next year instead. The financial hit is yet to be calculated, but the emotional toll of the crisis is clear.
Particularly if you have people in your gathering who are elderly, who are more excuse me.
Just take a moment. It's okay.
I went through SARS. I've been through Ebola. I've been through the pandemic in 2009. And I just know how stressful it is for our healthcare system, for my colleagues, and for families.
And with the outbreak widening in this country, it would seem that stress is only going to get worse. Mike Couture, Global News.
As Mike reported, 2 of the cases in BC are linked to a previous voyage on the Grand Princess cruise ship. That boat is anchored off the coast of San Francisco with 3,500 passengers and crew on board, including 237 Canadians. At least 21 people on the ship have tested positive for COVID-19. That's on top of the rising number of cases across the U.S., including a popular destination for Canadians this time of year, Florida. 2 people have now died in that state. As Abigail Bimman reports, the number of test kits being made available to Americans isn't keeping up with the demand.
Minutes after passengers on board the Grand Princess learned 21 people tested positive for COVID-19, Global News spoke to Canadians John and Assunta Gerritsen.
We feel fine, and I guess I'm just concerned now about what's going to happen.
The former Ontario cabinet minister and his wife were set to fly back to Canada Saturday. That plan sidelined.
We've just been basically put into a lockdown situation to stay in our staterooms, and they're providing us with our meals and entertainment.
You have people that are sick.
U.S. President Donald Trump weighed in on the 3,500 people floating off the coast of California, including 237 Canadians.
Leave everybody on the ship for a period of time.
But said he'd ultimately let the experts decide, as BC's health minister issued the sternest warning about traveling on cruises from a Canadian official yet.
If you're asking my advice, I say don't go.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, tasked with dealing with the outbreak, is in Florida to meet with cruise ship executives.
At the present moment, we've distributed more than 1 million tests.
That state saw its first deaths from the virus, the first outside the West Coast.
This administration is now scrambling to try to make up for a very slow start, to reckon with how fast this illness would spread.
New York declared a state of emergency with yet another spike in cases. The governor urging anyone placed on a voluntary quarantine to adhere to it.
Violating those rules is, first, I think, disrespectful to members of the community. It doesn't honor your responsibility as a citizen. And you can be putting people in danger.
Cancellations keep rolling in, including music festivals such as Texas's South by Southwest. The University of Washington and Stanford have canceled all in-person classes for the rest of the quarter. And a number of businesses are asking employees to stay home, including tech giants on the West Coast. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Washington.
We're watching 2 other cruise ships in limbo tonight. Egyptian authorities say a ship with over 150 tourists on the Nile River has been quarantined after 45 people tested positive for COVID-19. There are no Canadians on board. And Malaysia has turned away a cruise ship carrying 2,000 passengers. The Costa Fortuna was also denied port at a popular Thai resort because of the presence of 64 Italians on board. If you do show symptoms after returning home from abroad or have been in contact with someone who may have been exposed, Health Canada has specific guidelines it wants you to follow. You should isolate yourself immediately. Call ahead to a health professional or public health authority for advice on what to do. Be ready to describe your symptoms and travel history. Health authorities are also asking anyone who's sick to stay home from work, but not all employers provide sick benefits. That puts workers in a tough spot when faced with losing pay. As Ross Lord reports, there are calls for new measures to protect employees who are ill and the people they work with.
Taking sick days isn't easy for Kim Stewart. She's a real estate agent. Face-to-face contact with customers is crucial, even when she's not feeling well.
And I've gone out there wrapped up in a scarf. I've said, like, don't touch me. I've tried not to touch door handles with my hands or anything, and I've been out there working while I was ill.
The last thing she'd ever want to do is spread a deadly virus, but it's tough to follow health authorities' advice and stay home if she develops flu-like symptoms that could turn out to be COVID-19. Many others face a similar predicament because taking a sick day means losing salary.
Our entire livelihood is based upon our ability to work. So, if we can't get to work, then we can't pay rent.
We don't get paid if we're sick.
Concerns are growing across Canada that choosing between getting paid and going into isolation could allow the virus to spread. BC Premier John Horgan is urging employers to be generous with sick time.
If they don't have sick leave benefits for their employees in these circumstances, I think they might want to consider that as a solid investment in not just their employees, but their business.
In Nova Scotia and in Ontario, there are also calls for mandatory paid sick days. The Nova Scotia government says it will consider removing a requirement for doctor's notes, at least for government workers.
Even if for the short term that we actually suspend that practice.
Some small businesses disagree.
There are other employers that look at it from saying, I need some controls on whether people are going to be off sick and making sure that it's a legitimate illness.
Tough decisions are looming. Health authorities expect the coronavirus responsible for COVID-19 to spread even to areas like Atlantic Canada that currently don't have any cases. If and when it does, it could put Kim Stewart and many others in an unenviable position. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Italy's government is putting Milan and several regions nearby into lockdown in a bid to contain the outbreak. Starting today, nobody can enter or exit those areas. The Pope canceled all public appearances going forward and will instead stream services on the internet. Also today, the leader of Italy's Democratic Party confirmed he has COVID-19 via Facebook. There has been a big jump in cases in Italy, which continues to record the highest deaths per day in the world. Italy's Civil Protection Agency confirms another 36 people died in just 24 hours, and another 1,000 people were infected. Numbers have spiked in Iran, where more than 1,000 new cases were reported by the country's health ministry, which fears the number of cases could be much higher. Another 21 people died in Iran today, bringing the death toll to 145. One of those deaths was a conservative MP. It's another sign the virus is spreading within state institutions. Iran's deputy health minister and another member of parliament have contracted COVID-19. Frantic rescue efforts are underway in southeastern China, where a hotel used to quarantine people infected with COVID-19 collapsed. The hotel was being used to isolate and monitor people arriving from regions hardest hit by the new coronavirus. So far, at least 43 of the 70 people trapped under the rubble have been rescued. We know you have lots of questions about this virus, and we want to help answer them. Send an email to your questions at globalnews.ca, and our Jeff Semple will consult experts to find the answers. You'll also find extensive information on our website. We have a special page dedicated entirely to the new coronavirus. That's at globalnews.ca/coronavirus. Coming up, while the family of an Iranian man killed in the Ukrainian Airlines tragedy is looking for help in Canada. A fresh flare-up in tension today as more migrants tried to cross into Greece from Turkey. Police used tear gas to drive them back, and there are reports some were stripped, beaten, and sent back across the border. Thousands of migrants have been trying to enter through Greece's border after Turkey announced it would no longer stop them crossing over to countries in the EU. The family of an Iranian passenger killed on Flight 752 is now looking for help here in Canada. Their son was on his way to Edmonton to study at the University of Alberta when the Ukrainian Airlines plane was shot down. Now his family members say they've been threatened in their home country for speaking out about his death, and they're looking for refugee status here. Global's Quinn Ohler reports.
The images are hard to forget. Flight 752 shot down shortly after takeoff from Tehran Airport. For Amir Hussein Sayedinia's mother, she remembers the hours before, her son saying goodbye before boarding the flight.
It was very hard to say goodbyes. He went for the gate and waved. He told his dad several times, please take care of mom.
His family now shattered.
They took somebody from me who was my everything, all my hopes, all my dreams.
Along with the heartache, Sayedinia's family says they've been targeted and threatened by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They say they were under surveillance for talking about their loved one and claiming, despite what Iranian officials have said, the missile attack was no accident. It started right after his death.
I lost my most precious thing.
حکومت به من میگه
And the regime tells me not to speak up, not to say anything.
The student's parents, brother, and aunt fled to Turkey, leaving everything behind: homes, cars, all their belongings.
Our voice has been suffocated. We can't say anything, so I wanted to share those stories with everybody else.
Now they're asking for help.
We're hoping that the Canadian government would help us demand justice.
And say if they are forced to go home, they fear they will be arrested and killed. For their son, they say, they'll never stop telling his story.
I want the whole world to know there was a boy named Amir Hossein, and I'm ruined now that it's gone.
Quinn Ohler, Global News, Edmonton.
Gabbard's gamble still ahead. A presidential hopeful goes all in with the odds against her. America's largest presidential primary field has been narrowed down to 3, but only 2 will spar on the stage during this month's Democratic debate. The 2 male candidates, both in their 70s. The third candidate, a 37-year-old woman, hasn't qualified for a debate in 2020. But as Reggie Cecchini explains, that hasn't stopped Tulsi Gabbard from pulling the punches.
Aloha!
She may not have the name recognition of her competitors, but Tulsi Gabbard, a Democratic presidential hopeful, has stamina and apparently staying power.
I can't do the math on any of that. And I'm a pollster, but I can't do the math on any of that.
So I ask you to join me.
Gabbard, a Hawaii representative, entered the Democratic race on January 11th, 2019. And in that time, she's managed to find herself both out of and right in the spotlight.
We've been dealing with basic total blackout throughout this entire campaign.
The Iraq War veteran, with only 2 pledged delegates, has failed in all primary contests so far and barely qualified for early debates.
That as much as they have tried to erase us from this election, we stand strong.
Gabbard's struggles are self-inflicted. At times, she sounded more like President Trump than a Democrat.
And it is the Constitution that provides that our foreign policy is set by the President of the United States, not by unelected bureaucrats.
And acted as a presidential supporter, not voting yes on impeachment.
We could end up with a Republican House, Republican Senate, and a Republican administration.
She's a target for her own party, accused of being an apologist for Syria's leader, and is a fan favorite of bots on social media, leading to this veiled swipe.
I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's a favorite of the Russians.
Hillary Clinton is labeling me as a foreign agent and a traitor.
But if running on a series of controversy is the plan, pollsters say it isn't working.
I have no clue what the rationale is for staying in this race.
And with odds of a win matching her polling at 1 in 100, Tulsi Gabbard may be the only one still willing to place that bet. Reggie Cecchini, Global News, Washington.
Up next, Crime Beat. Global News digs into the death of an Alberta girl. Tonight marks the debut of a new series on Global television called Crime Beat. It will examine some of Canada's darkest crimes and the impact they've had on our society. The first episode features a tragedy involving a young Calgary girl. Global's Nancy Hixt explains why she wanted to begin the series with the story of Mika Jordan.
In my house, I have a bulletin board where I put up photos of the people I love. In the top left corner, there's a picture of the most beautiful little girl. You can see she's bright, playful, smart, innocent. The girl in the picture is Mika Jordan. She's a part of my heart, but I never got to meet her.
This was a girl that I honestly don't think had the capability to have a bad day.
I've been a crime reporter for more than 2 decades. I cover dark subject matter day in and day out. As a journalist, I try to make sense of these crimes, but some are so horrific, they're simply beyond comprehension. On November 13th, 2011, Mika Jordan was rushed to hospital. She died the following day. Could a 6-year-old girl be that badly injured from a fall down the stairs? Just days after losing their daughter, I met Mika's mother and stepfather, Kyla and Brian Woodhouse.
The first time we got to see her,
was when we finally realized how serious of a situation it actually was.
I was extremely shocked. The true part of it is I am still in shock. There's still part of me that wants her to come walking through that door.
I learned this was a split family. Mika and her little brother spent half their time with them and the other half of their time with Spencer Jordan and Marie Magoon, their biological dad and stepmother. The weekend Mika was rushed to hospital, the two kids were supposed to be at their mom's. Instead, their father and stepmother kept them. There were only two people with access to Mika that fateful day. I decided to try to speak with them.
Hi there. Hi, I'm just from Global News. We're just hoping we could talk to you about the death of Mika Jordan.
No comment. No.
The case took many twists and turns, making it difficult to share the complete story in a typical 2-minute news report. That was the starting point of the Crime Beat podcast, a platform where, as a journalist, I could give a full perspective on the impact of this case. Mika's mom and stepdad do everything they can to keep Mika's memory alive. And now her story is being shared with a wider audience on our new global TV series, Crime Beat.
Brian had always said, she had the power to change the world one day. And unfortunately, the loss of her life had to be the way that she did it.
Nancy Hixt, Global News.
You can watch Mika Jordan's story on the debut of Crime Beat tonight on Global TV. And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight Your Canada is the Wild Pacific Trail in Ucluelet, BC. Email your pictures to viewers@globalnational.com. And a reminder, it's time to spring forward for daylight saving time. So set your clocks ahead 1 hour before you go to bed. It'll be the last time in Yukon where daylight saving is becoming permanent. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.